Wait for it. Listen for the crowd here.
Today, we're announcing Dungeons & Dragons Universes Beyond. A hand-picked collection of some of the...
Even the presenter laughs.
A hand-picked collection.
And look at the live chat. Ugh. Oof. Oh, God. Is that Michael Scott? Someone says RuneScape and no, don't do like MTG. So there's a hint, but we are going to answer these questions. What exactly is Dungeons & Dragons Universes Beyond? Why can't D&D fans agree on whether it's good or bad? And at the end, I'll share my predictions about this strange news. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing tabletop RPGs together, and this poor guy, this poor sacrificial lamb of a guy, bracing himself for a volley of tomatoes. That is none other than Dan Ayub, head of D&D franchise at Wizards of the Coast. And that company, Wizards of the Coast, publishes both D&D and the uber-popular fantasy trading card game, Magic the Gathering. It's a paradox, really, where even though everybody and their grandma has at least heard of D&D, either from Stranger Things or because it's been around for 50 plus years, the game of D&D is still pretty niche and therefore not nearly as lucrative as Magic the Gathering, the big moneymaker for Wizards of the Coast. When you boil it down, Magic is just like cheap pieces of cardboard with cool pictures on it that they can charge a lot of money for because nerds like me gleefully dump their paychecks on it. To clarify, that is nerds like me. I don't play Magic myself, but we're not so different. I've bought way too many pieces of cardboard and paper, mostly for the cool pictures on it. I've heard some nerds actually read these things, but I mean, who would want to own a long-lasting piece of physical media when you can pay monthly to stare at screen? But besides draining Velcro wallets across the globe, Magic the Gathering has also become known for, depending on how you view it, either expanding or diluting its own fantasy brand with a multitude of intellectual property crossovers, reaching into the pockets of entirely separate fandoms through an initiative called, you guessed it, Universes Beyond. And apparently, this is where the real money comes from. Magic the Gathering x Final Fantasy made $200 million in a single day. Oh, wow. So if we roleplay as business analyst for a moment, hold on, that's LARP as analyst. That's what the internet calls it these days. According to this earnings report from Q2 2025, when that Final Fantasy Magic deck came out, Magic earned a total of $412 million, while D&D plus the rest of Hasbro Gaming, so besides Magic, earned only a measly pittance of about $200 million altogether. So are you thinking what I'm thinking? Best way to make a number go up?
Dungeons & Dragons Universes Beyond.
And seriously, that might be the best way. That $200 million from Final Fantasy Magic cards came from fans of Magic and Final Fantasy, so what is the problem here? Why did the D&D announcement get a live chat comment saying, no, don't do like MTG? Simply put, since 2021, when Magic formalized these crossovers, some have been obvious bangers, like Final Fantasy and Lord of the Rings, while others have rubbed people the wrong way. One example I found being the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, which was met with fatigue from the fans. But still, why? Why do you hate Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? They eat pizza, just like you and me. Feel free to correct me in the comments, for I am merely a cousin of the Magic fandom, but my understanding as to why Universes Beyond got a bad reputation comes down to two things. One, diluting the brand, which we already mentioned, and is not that big a deal because no one's forcing you to buy these Ninja Turtle pizza cards. Oh wait. Second reason, competitive Magic players might be kind of forced to buy these pizza cards? Not the pizza, necessarily, but Magic is not only a collector's hobby and a fun game to play and discuss among friends, it is also a competitive activity. At game stores, conventions, schools, probably the most dedicated Magic players and customers are the ones locked in. We're talking full gamer lean over over the composition of their decks and how to best deploy those cards at tournaments. So this huge aspect of the hobby is disrupted by cards like the Nuka-Cola vending machine from the Fallout video game, poster child of the potential for artifact tokens to be easy to break. I have no idea what that means. That's a direct quote from a Magic the Gathering blog, link below. But it sounds like over the years, Universes Beyond has introduced certain outlandish cards that competitive players may feel pressured to play with against their own personal preference for the game's original fantasy genre, and or against the spirit of building your own deck with a personal creative strategy rather than an objectively optimal strategy built around these outlier cards. So the logical follow-up question becomes, does this magic angst for Universes Beyond carry over directly to Dungeons & Dragons? Well, clearly it sort of does. But why this pessimism in D&D when D&D is not competitive? To answer, we'll dig into the D&D player comments about the first crossovers already revealed, and then later get to my positive hypothesis for how Universes Beyond could shake out differently in Dungeons & Dragons. But first, you know how YouTubers praise a sponsored item once and then never mention it again? Well, 6 months later, my FlexiSpot Kana Japanese Joinery Bed and nightstands are still fantastic. Our old bed was okay. In fact, Grace and I thought we needed a new mattress because it had gotten lumpy and sunken in, just uncomfortable. We figured the new bed would be a good start. Super easy to build, much more stylish, natural materials that literally slot together without a bunch of finicky screws to get creaky over time. Turns out, this bed frame is way more supportive than our old box spring, extending the life of our old mattress, and we've been sleeping better ever since. Also, because we learned that this stylish rubber wood can be sustainably harvested after the latex producing lifespan of this tree. We love how the nightstands can fit big or a lot of RPG books, the bed's 10-inch clearance has way more storage space, we like the options between the headboards online, and now you can click the link below to experience the FlexiSpot bed frame for yourself. Don't miss out. Use our exclusive code JPBF for an instant discount and transform your sleep with comfort, convenience, and unmatched value. For Universes Beyond in D&D, I think it's very different from MTG. It's much harder to go to a local game store and ask a player if they have SpongeBob in their deck and remove it before playing because it ruins immersion, than it is to say before the start of a D&D campaign, hey players, a few character building restrictions. Nothing from the Rick and Morty book, and no SpongeBob. You can ask about homebrew, but I'd like to look at it first. This comment from my initial video about all the recent D&D news has over 300 likes, clearly resonating with a lot of people and lining up with this idea that the non-competitive, actually collaborative nature of D&D makes it less awkward for game groups to only include the player options that make sense to them. But when we get into the 2 specific crossovers already announced, opinions diverge a little bit. The first D&D Universes Beyond reveal was World of Warcraft. This Warcraft crossover news actually leaked about a week ahead of the official announcement, but not the part indicating that it is a Universes Beyond project. Therefore, we got an interesting 2-part survey at how fans responded to this same crossover project before and then after they knew it was part of Universes Beyond. Here's the before comments about the Warcraft leak from TTRPG news site EN World. Whizbang Dusty Boots says, not something I expected, but perfectly rational in retrospect. Space Darwin predicted the future. Makes sense, we'll be seeing the start of the official Universes Beyond type product from WotC soon. And Genius said, to be honest, though this is not a traditional WotC realm, Azeroth is a very popular realm that triggers nostalgia. Alongside Felicia Day's Ren Fair, that is a lot of World of Warcraft coverage after years of low WoW manifestations. And there were many other comments along these lines. A combination of, WoW makes sense, used to play a lot of WoW, might check this out. But then, after the Universes Beyond announcement, here are the comments from an article on the same site. Feels very Magic the Gathering, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. Here's the new hotness, please forget what we published and won't support from last season. The contrast in Universes Beyond between World of Warcraft versus Star Wars is leading to some confusion without more information on this Star Wars announcement. I think Star Wars deserves its own dedicated system, but I'm actually excited about the Warcraft supplement. I'm cool with the sky falling if the sky is made of more source books. Overall, still leaning positive, and that is pretty interesting knowing they had different information. But you can see the attention has shifted to the arguably more pivotal Star Wars crossover reveal as the second Universes Beyond D&D project coming in late 2027. They kind of spoiled it for my delivery in this video, but you know what really spoiled the D&D Star Wars crossover that everyone missed? This is a tangent, but I can't believe this happened. At the beginning of the D&D keynote presentation with all of these announcements, one of the fantasy authors they brought on stage to talk about a different upcoming project basically gave away the Star Wars bit. He said,
and we got some big plans just starting to stir. Do I get to kill a Wookiee?
Do I get to kill a Wookiee? A Wookiee. Unprompted, no other references to Star Wars at this time, or like, I can't believe he did that. And the host on stage played it cool.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want. And the author repeats.
As long as I kill Wookiees, I'm happy.
The crowd just kind of laughed it off a little. Again, this came out of nowhere, so they didn't know what to think, even if they heard him correctly. The live comments called it out, sort of. What did Wookiees ever do to you, bro? Wookiees, challenge accepted. Just enough recognition to clarify that was him blowing the lid off the Star Wars D&D announcement, but it fell under the radar. Anyway, before we get to the more concerned community comments about D&D Star Wars, there's two other crucial points about this Warcraft crossover. One, the lead designer was freaking born for this project. I covered this in my video summarizing all the announcements, so essentially, he's a self-described Warcraft superfan, he playtested the material among D&D fans, and among the people who produce WoW, and he's the most experienced game designer that I know of currently working for D&D. Born to do this. And secondly, the Warcraft crossover is already blowing up. This trailer has over 2 million views in 4 days. Just for comparison, that makes it the 4th most viewed video of all time on the D&D YouTube channel. Okay, Editor Bob coming in here with an observation. These views, they're not fake views, but I think these top viewed videos were all promoted as ads, and that's how they got here. The easiest culprit to point out is the Dungeon Masters Campaign 2 official trailer has about 5 million views. Meanwhile, the Campaign 1 trailer has like 150,000. That's still a great number of views, but these two videos with millions of views between them have the same number of likes and comments. So with 3 out of 5 of these trailers being pushed somehow, it's likely that the views from the Warcraft trailer were also pushed, but again, with over 12,000 likes and over 1,300 comments, almost 1,400, so the numbers are still pointing at what I thought they were pointing at for at least the Warcraft trailer. And that means, holy crap, this looks like it could be the most anticipated D&D product of all time. How many Warcraft fans will actually buy the book when it comes out? No idea. But it looks like it's doing exactly what Universes Beyond is supposed to do. Reaching into the Velcro wallets of another nerdy fandom. And that means, dear God, the D&D Star Wars project, whatever that turns out to be, could completely overwhelm the D&D YouTube ecosystem and D&D itself. And that is what has some D&D fans a bit worried. My small beef with Universes Beyond and D&D is that there are already TTRPG systems for various settings, including Star Wars, that those looking to play in that universe can use. Not all systems are created equal, but I personally don't want to see D&D become the dominant way to play in different settings, which may cause those smaller licensed systems to become relics of the past. Another similar comment. I only have 2 concerns here. The first is if it leads to a larger percentage of D&D players being the kind of players who never venture beyond D&D, this is absolutely what Hasbro is hoping for. The second is if it leads to more publishers deciding to use D&D 5.x for settings that make absolutely no sense using those mechanics. I mean, Star Wars is a perfectly good setting to use a D&D-like system for, being a fantasy action-adventure set in space. They did so about 25 years ago, and some of my favorite optional rules from 3.5 come from that game. Doctor Who, on the other hand, has no business using a system designed from the ground up to be about getting into a bunch of fights to the death. And I'll emphasize that these concerns do seem to be coming from a minority of D&D fans. However, these are comments from my video where I was pretty positive about it. If we look back at the same website for comparison, it's even more positive. Now this is pod racing. Sorry, I'm very interested to see how they do this. As I was watching, I was feeling a bit cynical and old, and then they mentioned Star Wars, and I got tears in my eyes. I'm not sure why. It's not like there aren't at least 3 other Star Wars games out there, but I definitely joined the hype train on that one. And Whiz-Bang Dusty Boots is back saying, man, some big moves with WotC and 5.5. Also looking forward to making a Mag-Har Orc Jedi. So, very positive. But then, one of my RPG YouTuber pals, Bonus Reaction, posted this poll with a 53-47 positive-negative split opinion. And there's this poll by D&D with 32,000 votes ranking Dark Sun as the most anticipated announcement from that whole presentation, ahead of Star Wars and Warcraft, which are about tied. And at the time of making this video, I have yet to see any coverage from more hyperbolic RPG news sources, though I honestly expect the excitement will show up there too, only with maybe a heavier emphasis on the cash grab intentions behind this whole initiative. Which I agree with, Wizards of the Coast is a for-profit company. I would add that at least this appears to be a lesser evil among cash grabs compared to loot boxes, microtransactions, subscription models, digital only, shoving AI into everything. So I just think until we know more, there are more interesting parts of this story to focus on. However, I was fascinated by this money-focused, very long comment from my video with only 2 likes, so not a lot of people saw this, but I think it's something to look out for. Speaking with my UK retailer hat on, my perception is not that Universes Beyond has brought a lot of people into playing Magic, but by coinciding with the trading card game speculator boom, a lot of people have simply bought up swaths of product as an investment. I genuinely don't see how the Universes Beyond approach is going to work for D&D. The only way I can see them appealing to the speculator market would be to adopt the current, lamentable comic industry practice of blind bag random covers. That's a basically gambling aspect that is something to look out for with future D&D Universes Beyond projects. No news that's happening, just something to think about. And there's one more piece of this comment that we have to mention because it was echoed in many other comments on my video. They said, in terms of Star Wars, everyone seems to have forgotten that we'd had not 1, but 2 D&D Star Wars editions in the 2000s. And to this, I must say 2 things. If the D&D Universes Beyond Star Wars project turns out to be anything like the Warcraft one, this is not very comparable to those 3rd edition Star Wars games. This will literally be Dungeons & Dragons Star Wars, not a standalone Star Wars game built on D&D mechanics. Maybe that difference is not significant to some people because compatibility would kind of work the same way, but from a branding perspective, it's a huge difference. It is the first time this has happened. Second, no, it's not that everyone has forgotten about those Star Wars games. It's that they never heard of them. No one has exact numbers on this, but it's estimated that the real majority of people playing D&D today have only been playing since the Stranger Things boom over the last 10 years. That's how much the hobby has grown. So if you remember 20 years ago D&D, that's cool, and I appreciate you keeping this game alive in its least popular decade, but I urge you to consider that if the most recent D&D Star Wars crossover happened about 20 years ago, that means a huge number of current D&D players were barely even born when that happened. Time comes for us all. Now, weaving it all together, when Dan Ayub, head of D&D franchise at Wizards of the Coast, said,
"Today, we're announcing Dungeons & Dragons Universes Beyond."
The fans had a right to groan, but we're already seeing through the Warcraft trailer views and Star Wars comments that most players seem excited about these changes. For me personally, having been playing the game for 11 years, not a small amount of time, this is still new. And at the very least, that makes it interesting. Dan also said in that presentation, they are trying to produce more D&D stuff for every kind of player. That's why one line of D&D products will bring back those OG fantasy authors, why another line is making the same kind of D&D 5e books people have liked for the past 10 years, I guess, in addition to making the first mature-rated D&D book in 20 years or so, and they're reaching towards these other brands in ways that appeal to the nostalgia of people who have been playing for 20 years or more, as well as appealing to people who may have not yet played their first game of D&D. So my prediction, which is probably not the direction they're going, but I hope it is that the mysterious D&D Star Wars project will be a beginner-friendly box set designed to support brand new players who like Star Wars and now finally have an excuse to try D&D. Even if they also produce a typical D&D book like they're doing with the Warcraft crossover, I think a D&D Star Wars starter set has vastly greater potential to hook new players on the hobby than a typical D&D book that will be like reading another language to those folks who haven't played before. And because these comments were correct, not all systems are created equal. D&D Star Wars is a decent fit because it's technically fantasy and there's a lot of combat. But there are other cool intellectual properties we've seen crossed over with Magic that just would not work in D&D. Or at least they would not be something anyone taking the rules seriously would hand pick, as these are all promised to be. Because yeah, D&D is still on the rules-heavy side of tabletop RPGs, and if the D&D Universes Beyond initiative is going to succeed at getting new players into the hobby, or even into D&D at all, then I believe the designers would be smart to do a lot of playtesting and ideally just lower the barrier to entry a little bit with a simplified version of the D&D 5th edition rules. But I know, I'm very biased because I do generally prefer TTRPGs that are more simple than D&D 5e. So please let me know, what do you think, and would you like to see another video covering the community's reaction to the mature-rated D&D Dark Sun trailer? Don't forget to like this video if you liked this video, and check out this one on your screen with all the D&D news if you missed it, and say thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for making these videos possible. Keep building.